Welcome to this overview of the February 16th, 2019 stated winter meeting of the Presbytery of West Virginia, which will be held at Kanawha United Presbyterian Church in Charleston, West Virginia. I am Susan Sharp Campbell, the Associate for Educational Ministry, and I hope that this video will help you as you prepare to attend the meeting. First, a few basics before turning to the document itself. Before arriving on the 16th, you will need to download the advance packet onto your tablet, phone, or computer, as Wi-Fi will not be available for use at the church. In addition, we're no longer printing packets for everyone. But if you need a packet, if you will contact the Presbytery office at 304-744-7634 or office@wvpresbytery.org prior to 5 p.m. on Thursday, February 14th, you will have a packet waiting for you when you arrive at the meeting in Charleston. Upon arrival at the church, you'll want to pick up your name tag at registration and purchase a meal ticket if you plan to eat lunch with us. Name tags will be color-coded to indicate your role at the meeting. To ensure that you have a printed name tag, please be sure that you have registered with the office prior to 9 a.m. on Thursday, February 14th. Please don't assume that just because you were at the last meeting or we think we know you're coming, you'll have a printed name tag without registering for this meeting. Between 9 a.m. when registration begins and 10 a.m. when the meeting begins, there'll be a time for fellowship and refreshments. This is a good time to speak with those who are familiar and get to know some new folks. Several key people to note during the meeting are as follows. First, there's Steve Hornbeck. Steve is a ruling elder from First Presbyterian Church in Buchanan, and he is our moderator for this year. Anytime you speak during the meeting, even during Good News from the pews, you will need to stand and face Steve as the moderator and speak to him, not to the people sitting in the pews with you. Second, there's Ed Thompson, our general presbyter, and finally, Maureen Wright, our stated clerk. Now onto the packet that was sent in an email link on February 7th or can be downloaded at www.wvpresbytery.org. The advance packet has 3 sections. The docket and committee reports on numbered pages 1 through 92. This seems like a lot of pages, and it is, but it includes the proposed revision to the Presbytery's manual. Then there's the bulletin for morning worship. If you wish to have a printed bulletin for worship, you'll need to print pages 95 to 97 and bring them with you. The final section has a number of flyers with information about upcoming events in the Presbytery. When you arrive and register for the morning, you'll be handed a printed packet of flyers. These are for you to take back to share with your session and your congregation. To prepare for the meeting, in addition to watching this video, you need to read the packet in order to become as informed as possible about the business we will be about on the 16th. You may want to pause here and go ahead and download it so you can refer to it as I walk through it with you. As Presbyterians, we believe that as we gather in councils of the church, the Holy Spirit moves among us, helping us to discern what God is calling us to be and to do. So don't read the packet to make up your mind in advance of how you're going to vote, but so you can become informed about what we will be focusing on. Remember that sometimes the Spirit speaks in the voices of those with whom we agree. Other times the Spirit speaks in the voices of others in surprising ways, and sometimes you may find the Holy Spirit leading you to speak, so that the Spirit might speak through you. And remember, it's better to speak as someone who is familiar with the material rather than speaking and in your words making it clear that you have no idea what you're talking about and you haven't read the packet. Reading, praying, and trusting that God will guide us together will prepare you for the meeting. After the moderator calls the meeting to order, Patterson Lyles, pastor of Kanawha United Presbyterian Church, will bring greetings and will share necessary information about the church. We will then move to the opening business of the Presbytery. This includes welcoming new minister members of the Presbytery of West Virginia, seating corresponding members, those who work within our bounds while remaining members of other presbyteries, and welcoming minister members of other presbyteries who may be visiting with us. This will also be a time to recognize ruling elders who are serving as commissioners to the presbytery for the first time. After the stated clerk has confirmed that a quorum is present, a quorum being 20% of minister members and 20% of our congregations represented by a ruling elder commissioner, We will then approve the docket that will guide our work for the day. You can find the docket on page 1 and 2 in the advance packet. The consent agenda consists of those items that the meeting planners don't think will generate discussion, so these items are all voted on at one time. However, if you or anyone else wishes to discuss a motion, or hear more about the intent of it, or need it clarified, only one person has to ask that it be pulled off the consent agenda, and it will be brought up at the time of the report of the committee which is recommending it. If, as you read the advance packet, you would like for an item to receive additional consideration, you may want to note the specific number and be prepared to request that it be removed. Items on the consent agenda for this meeting are requests for excused absences, that the offering received as part of our worship be used to help build a church in Neri Presbytery in Kenya, our sister presbytery, where a group of folks from West Virginia will be traveling this summer. The approval of honorable retirements, approval of an ordination commission, approval of moderators in churches without moderators, the renewal of pastoral covenants with stated supply pastors, commissioned pastors, and lay pastors, approval of an authorized lay preacher to preside at communion, request for a waiver of rotation of session members, approval of validated ministries. A little more about validated ministries. G-2.0503 in the Book of Order describes validated ministries, which are ministries outside the congregation. A validated ministry shall demonstrate conformity with the mission of God's people in the world, serve and aid others and enable the ministry of others, give evidence of fidelity to God's word, be carried on in accountability to the presbytery, and include responsible participation in the life of the presbytery and one of its congregations. The presbytery is required to review annually the work of all ministers of word and sacrament engaged in validated ministries outside the congregation. Back to the consent agenda. Approval of terms of call for ministers of word and sacrament to serve as pastors, approval of interim covenants, approval of communion for several Bluestone retreats to be held this year. You will find additional information about each of these items in the committee reports later in the packet. Please note that being on the consent agenda does not mean an item is considered unimportant or less important, just less likely to generate discussion. The next two items on the docket are the appointment of temporary clerks. These are ruling elders and ministers of word and sacrament who will be appointed by the moderator and will hand out any materials during the meeting as needed and count any votes other than voice votes. And the appointment of the Standing Committee on Bills and Overtures. This will consist of leadership team members present who would review any new business that was proposed to come before the body and make recommendation. Part of the morning of each presbytery meeting is used for education, information, and for relationship building. At this meeting, J. Herbert Nelson, the stated clerk of the General Assembly of the PCUSA, will be sharing with us the state of the church. This is a wonderful opportunity to learn more about his work and the work of our denomination. Following J. Herbert's presentation, Nellie Howard, our Resource Center Director, will share several new resources. These and many others that she will have with her in the Resource Center display can be checked out throughout the day. If you already have checked out resources, you may also return any of them to her at the time of this meeting. We will conclude the morning with worship. J. Herbert Nelson will be our preacher. I would encourage you to encourage others in your congregation, particularly if you're in the greater Charleston area, to join us for this time of worship at 11:30 a.m. As part of worship, we will celebrate the sacrament of the Lord's Supper, where all of the bread will be gluten-free. Worship leaders, in addition to Reverend Nelson, will be Ruling Elder Sally Dougherty and Ministers of Word and Sacrament Kevin Gurink and Julie Hitzman. Again, if you want a printed worship bulletin, you'll need to print it and bring it with you. Following worship, we will break for lunch. Any new business must be submitted in writing to the stated clerk prior to lunch. Following lunch, we will return to the formal business of the presbytery, beginning with singing and prayer. It is at this time that we will remember those ruling elders and ministers of word and sacrament who have joined the Church Triumphant in 2018. Next will be the reports by our presbytery staff. Maureen Wright's stated clerk's written report notes correspondence she has received and referred and can be found on page 6. On page 7, you'll find procedural matters that guide us as a presbytery. These include principles of parliamentary law, courtesy to all, one item at a time, majority rule, respect the rights of the minority, justice for all and partiality for none. Generally, these describe how to work and play well and respectfully with others as we meet together. As items are discussed, pro and con speakers will alternate, with individuals identifying the position they support. When one has spoken on a pending question, all others wishing to speak will be heard before a person can speak a second time. It takes special permission for someone to speak on the same question more than twice. On this page, you'll also find provisions from the Presbytery's manual that are helpful for this meeting. These include who, in addition to ruling elder commissioners to this meeting and minister members of the Presbytery, have the ability to speak. That is, privilege of the floor with or without vote at this meeting. On the last section of page 5, you'll find procedural rules. Everyone speaking to the Presbytery, for whatever reason, needs to do so from a microphone. Once the speaker is recognized by the moderator, that person needs to identify himself or herself with a name, church name, or relationship to the presbytery. It's a matter of courtesy. An awareness that some people don't hear as well as they used to. Some of us don't talk as loud as we think we do, and though we'd like to think everybody else in the room knows our name, we don't. The limitation of debate is 30 minutes per main motion, with each speaker limited to 3 minutes per speech, although this item must be approved by 2/3 of those who are present and voting on the 16th. So as you read the packet, if you see an item you feel called to speak to during the meeting, you might want to consider writing your remarks out to help keep you focused and enable you to use those 3 minutes wisely. It's at this point in the meeting that we'll be voting on amendments to the Constitution of the Presbyterian Church USA that have been sent to the presbyteries by the General Assembly. You will find these in the amendment booklet, which can also be found at www.wvpresbytery.org. On that website, you will also find a video on these amendments to help prepare you. Next, we will hear from Ed Thompson, our General Presbyter. In his written report, you will find his reflections on the reality of our presbytery and its work, as well as information about his work in the last 3 months. We now move to committee reports. Committee reports usually have 2 parts. The first part consists of recommendations from the committee that need to be acted upon. The second part contains items of information. Many of these are events that are coming up in the future or the ongoing work of the committee in the past and coming months. Please remember that the information section is an important part of every report, and don't just glance over it or fly over it or skip it as you read the recommendations at the top of the committee report page. On page 8, you'll find a guide to motion basics that will inform our process as we take up recommendations throughout the day. The leadership team will be recommending the approval of a revised manual of operations to guide us in our mission. You'll find this beginning on page 54. As the first reading of this document was at the last meeting, this is the second reading, and we will be voting on it. The sections highlighted in yellow are those where changes have been made based on input from the first reading. If you want to see exactly how the revision differs from our current manual, you can find a link on the Presbytery's website called Current Presbytery Manual with Revision Details. The last part of the leadership team's report is electing members to the Presbytery's nominating committee, because our manual states that nominating committee members shall not nominate themselves. As with any nominations, this is not a consent agenda item, as nominations will be open. If you wish to nominate someone to serve on this committee, you must have the nominee's agreement and willingness to serve if elected. Next is the ministry committee. Most of their recommendations will have been approved with a consent agenda. Unless an item is removed from the consent agenda, the only remaining recommendation from the ministry committee is number 42 on page 21. It has to do with churches that pay moving expenses for pastors, also providing a bonus to cover the minister's corresponding increased tax burden. Note that at the end of the ministry committee report, you will find autobiographical statements and statements of faith for Monty Mitchell, Nancy Cahan, and Glenn Coleman, new minister members of our presbytery. The Vocations Committee is recommending that Mark Parsons Justice, an inquirer under the care of presbytery as he seeks to become a minister of Word and Sacrament, be approved as a candidate under care. As part of this step of the process, Mark will be asked to share his Christian experience, forms of service to the church, and motivation for seeking ordination as a minister of Word and Sacrament in the Presbyterian Church, USA. If this is approved, the committee is also then asking that the Book of Order requirement for time under care be waived. You will find the rationale for this on page 29 of the advance packet. Approval for this recommendation requires approval by 3/4 of voting members present, rather than a simple majority. Good news from the pews is an opportunity for ruling elders, and ruling elders only, to share some of the exciting things that are happening in their congregations. Perhaps someone else will hear what your church is doing and find some idea and inspiration in what's shared. If you are your session's ruling elder commissioner and would like to share, I encourage you to be prepared to do so in a fairly concise manner and to direct your remarks to the moderator using the microphone. As a reminder, ministers of Word and Sacrament are expected to not speak during this time. The Stewardship Committee has several pages of information in the advance packet on pages 30 to 46. This includes the financial status of the presbytery at the end of 2018, the report of churches per capita and shared mission giving in 2018, as well as per capita amounts and pledges for shared mission in 2019. Is your congregation on the list as one of the top 20 in benevolence pledges for 2019, or in the top giving per member pledges for 2019? Check on page 43. If you're at all competitive, maybe you can challenge your session and congregation to step it up. The final financial pages concern Bluestone Camp and Retreat and Friends of Bluestone's financial picture for 2018. The nominating committee will be recommending persons to serve on several of our committees in the coming years. There will be opportunities for nominations from the body gathered, also known as the floor, for each position. If you wish to nominate someone, please again be sure that they have agreed to serve if elected before you do so. The report of the Nurture Committee provides information on a number of events sponsored by the committee throughout the year as they seek to help those within our presbytery and sometimes even beyond our bounds to grow in faith, leadership skills, and knowledge for their own edification, as well as the building up of the faith communities in which they serve and the resources of the presbytery. Please read their report and share the information with those on your session and in your congregation. At this meeting, the committee will be highlighting Festival of Faith with Brian McLaren as our presenter, Presbyterian Youth Triennium, and other fast-approaching events. Like the Presbytery packet, much of the information on these events is sent by email. So when you go back, please help the committee. As you receive emails in your inbox, forward them to others in your congregation. The recommendation for the offering by the Mission Committee will most likely have been passed on the consent agenda, but don't forget to read through their information section also. For this meeting, the administration and Bluestone committees will not have oral reports, but please be sure to catch up on what they're doing in their written reports on pages 51 and 52. Following these written reports and the evaluation page, you will come to the proposed revision for the manual. Please don't just think it's too long and skip over it prior to the meeting. Following the items on the docket that was approved, if there is any new business that was submitted in writing before lunch, it will be taken up at this point in the day. At the beginning of the afternoon, hard copies of the meeting evaluation will be distributed. Please take the time to complete this, either with ideas that come to you throughout the day or at the end of the meeting. These help us with planning of future meetings. If you indicate that you're willing to help with a future presbytery worship service, please be sure to include your name at the bottom of the page, and then put these evaluation forms and your name tags in the boxes by the door as you leave. I promise we will read the evaluations and recycle the name tags. The meeting will conclude with a charge and benediction by the moderator. But don't click off too fast. A few more things. Please scroll all the way to the end of the packet, fast past the 50 or so pages of that manual revision to find the worship bulletin, and then keep scrolling and find the flyer packets, the flyer information on upcoming events. These include the Toolbox course on addiction and poverty on March 15th, Festival of Faith on April 6th, Communication and Team Building Workshop on April 30th, the Guys Weekend at Bluestone on April 26th to 28th, information on Youth Council applications, which are due April 30th, and also on scholarship and loan information for those pursuing secondary education, which are due on April 30th as well. Also information on the Bluestone Spring Getaway Retreat, May 3 through 5, where Spencer Askew will be back with us to lead that, and Bricks for a Church in Neary Presbytery. By the end of the day, I suspect some of you will think it has been a long day, a long meeting, and for some, long distance to travel. But remember, your work as a commissioner to this presbytery is not complete until you share the information gleaned, actions taken, and flyers distributed with your session. As always, I hope this video will be helpful to all who are planning to attend the Presbytery meeting at Kanawha United, particularly, though, for those of you for whom this is your first Presbytery of West Virginia meeting. If you have any feedback on the video, please send it to me, see me, talk to me about it, or put it on your evaluation. It helps me each time I prepare this. Thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to seeing you on Saturday, February 16th.